Hi, this is Mike Slater from the Northwest Traction Modelers group. Recently on the Traction Modelers Facebook page, I was asked about a picture I posted about me making a mold box and prepping to make rubber molds to cast some side frames for the IT Streamliner, and then down below the Chicago North Shore Milwaukee 458 or 459 X Oregon electric freight motors. Reason why I'm making a rubber mold and casting copies of these side frames is I'm using Stanton drives on my models, and especially with the IT Streamliner, the set that I'm painting for a friend of mine was missing a set of side frames on one of the trucks, so I'm down a set. And the other thing too is these typically a lot of times these side frames are soldered to plates, and instead of ruining a perfectly good truck, which in this case I had to do on the IT Streamliner, on the North Shore 458 model I bought, it was already a basket case, and the side frames already had been removed by the previous owner to do the Stanton drive conversion, which was never completed, which I have completed. And the process of making a rubber mold is first I make my mold box and try to make it a little bit larger than the items that you're going to be wanting to make the mold of, or the copies of. I use silicone sealant. Manufacturer of the silicone sealant is not important, but this is a tube I just picked up recently at my local hardware store. After you open up the end of the tip, and it will have a shelf life, so if you're not making a lot of rubber molds, or you don't need to do some home improvement with the silicone sealant, after a period of time it will harden and will be unusable. Also, for those of you that are into toy trains like Lionel or Mike's Train House and are familiar with the rubber traction tires, I also use this product to make new traction tires in the grooves of the larger scale trains. Actually, it seems to last a lot longer than the rubber bands that they use for traction tires on the models. A little tip that I learned on the OGR forum for the OGR magazine. But basically, what you will need to do after you have your components glued down with the silicone sealant is you'll need to spray a mold release so your silicone sealant will not stick to the two-part rubber mold components. The products I use are from Smooth-On. There's no real big brand preference. I just have been using Smooth-On products for a long period of time. A local hobby shop that's now closed used to carry their products, so I had pretty good access to it. And basically all you do is you take the mold release and shake it up. You probably hear me shaking it up with the steel ball inside, and then you just kind of lightly spray. You don't have to saturate the items. You just need to put a thin film down to separate the give a little oily film to separate the so as far as the product I use for the rubber mold is a pourable urethane rubber from Smooth-On. I use the VitaFlex 30 30 durometer rubber. It seems to work well for me. Here is a rubber mold that I made for another item, and it has good strength to the rubber mold. Here's a two-piece rubber mold, and it's actually for a North Shore ferry truck. If you're going to do two-piece molds, you'll gets a little bit more complex than what I'm going to be showing you here, but you can see I have different shapes, so I always key the item in the proper location at the same time. One thing that I didn't do that I should have done, I should have added some vents. So here I had taken a drill and tried drilling the rubber. Didn't quite keep the holes open, so I just buy some evergreen tubing and I just kind of shove it into the hole, and each time the tubing usually is a one-shot deal. So when I do my next pour, I'll have to pull all these filled tubings with the resin inside of it and shove in some new tubes to act as my vent holes. So some lessons learned. But one downfall with this VitaFlex is it does have a shelf life, and the part B seems to not solidify and is usable for longer periods of time. But unfortunately, the part A will harden and will become unusable. So that's one thing to keep in mind with this product. So try to have as many molds ready to manufacture at one particular given time, so you don't have to do like I did here and throw it in the garbage. Here's another container that I had open. This one here, luckily, I used majority of the bottle. It's probably that much here left in the bottom of the bottle that has hardened, so at least that wasn't a big waste like my other bottle. But does kind of add up. These kits for the rubber with a part A and part B typically are around $25–30 a kit. So try to do as many molds as you can in one shot. Then for my resin, I also use a Smooth On product, but I don't typically just use Smooth On if I'm in a dire rush to do some casting resin and I can't wait to get my shipment of Smooth On through Amazon, which when you order it through Amazon, you can buy it directly through Smooth On, these kits. And but Hobby Lobby also sells another type of resin and a rubber mold compound, which I've used in the past. Nothing wrong with it. I just prefer the Smooth On product just for the ease of use. But like I said, I've used the liquid plastic here that I use, the Smooth Cast 300. Your parts will come out white like that. You can buy coloring agents to color your resin, but one thing with that is it will make the resin a little bit weaker as you try to make your color darker, because you are adding a foreign agent into your resin. The brand that Hobby Lobby sells for their casting supplies in their model department has kind of an off-white color. Of course, with any of these resins, before you paint it, you make sure you want to get all your release agent off, so you don't have any paint issues with paint not sticking. Had that recently with a product that were some resin shells I bought from a source, and that particular resin that he's using, which I'm not sure the manufacturer, I actually had to use lacquer thinner to cut the mold release agent. I'm going to do some experimenting personally with these two different products to see what lacquer thinner will do to the resins. Years ago, I always heard that was a big no-no. You never clean your resins with lacquer thinner, but I guess different types of resins can take different harsh abuse of different chemicals. So when you buy your products from Smooth On or any of the manufacturers, usually they'll always be sealed with a foil film. If that's broken, then you know you have an older container, and then again, look at the product and make sure it hasn't solidified. One product that I use from Smooth On also, and usually you can buy these in quantities, are these measuring cups. And on the measuring cups, they'll have a scale grade, so you can figure out how much product you're pouring into your container, so you can have equal amounts of part A or part B in this case. Other products that these resin companies will sell, it may not be a 1-to-1 ratio. It may be a 25-75% ratio, so make sure you look at your products. The VitaFlex mold compound that I'm using has a 30-minute pot life, and it has a total cure time of 16 hours. So when I pour this rubber into the mold here, I'll have about 24 hours before I can use the mold. And then, of course, when you do your first castings in that, you always want to make sure you spray a little bit of mold release so your parts will pop out. Again, don't saturate, because the more mold release you spray on, the more that you'll have to wash off or remove from your castings. And you don't always have to spray it. I found you don't have to spray it every time. Maybe spray it every 2 to 3 pours. Usually the mold release will kind of stick around a little bit in the mold. It doesn't go away each time with the resin cast. In this case here, I just poured the part A into the container here. It's part A is a little bit thicker of a pour than pouring in part B, but kind of using my mold box kind of as a rough idea to the container. The size of my container is roughly about the size of the container, you know, a little bit less, and kind of doing a rough height look at it. Okay, it was about close to about 2 ounces in the height range, so I poured in 1 ounce of the part A, and I'll pour in 1 ounce of the part B, and I don't need to fill the mold to the top if I don't have to, as long as it's covering all the details. So I should have enough material for this one particular rubber mold. So here I just added part B into the container, and now I got it at the 2 ounce mark. So now I'll thoroughly stir the part A and part B together. Make sure you do not try to get any air bubbles into it, because again, air bubbles will affect your rubber mold. If you have a bubble by your area, then it'll cause an issue of having an not perfect casting. Okay, now that I have the part A and part B equally mixed, one may want to kind of pour the rubber right over the top of the castings, but actually don't. Actually pour it off to the side and try to do a thin little stream and let the rubber actually work its way to the items and over the items. And also, by doing a thin stream like this, you'll hopefully help eliminate any air bubbles. And again, let the rubber flow into the cavities. One thing you can also do to help out, because I did see some bigger voids, you can also take a stick sometimes, or an old paintbrush that you're ready to throw out, and just kind of make sure you, again, don't have any air bubbles into your mix here. But now, one thing you'll want to make sure you do is you store this on a somewhat level surface. Of course, what I am sitting on here is not level, but if I move it around a little bit there, it seems to level out here. That comes more so important in when you do your resin casting too. You'll want to make sure that you're on a flat area. And if it does overflow a little bit, no big deal. Just make sure you're doing your pours over something that you can clean off. In this case, a plastic tote case. That rubber will peel right off without an issue. So this is Mike Slater from the Northwest Traction Modelers Group, saying thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.